What's up, Strength House Nation? We've got episode 15 of the Strength House podcast coming at you. We're doing a complete Q&A episode today, so all user-submitted questions. We got questions about how to fix hitching deadlifts, how to train around injuries, how to adjust a powerlifting program for general population clients, and how to clean up the fitness industry. We got two great beers coming at you tonight. Stay tuned. The Strength House podcast, featuring Greg Robbins and Tony Bonvecchio.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Strength House podcast. This is episode 15, and we are flying solo tonight. I am alongside Tony, as always, and I have a question that popped right in my head. What is the most famous athlete you know that wears number 15?
Dustin Pedroia?
Good enough for me. I didn't know a single one.
You know why I know that?
Why?
Because that's where I wear in co-ed softball.
Oh. Except we don't. Did you still have your jersey?
Yeah.
I lost my jersey.
Little guy, big heart.
I had a 77. I had jersey 77 for Ray Borg, but it was stolen from me, I think. Let someone borrow it, and they took it. But anyways, we have an episode lined up for you guys tonight where we're going to be fielding a smorgasbord of different questions that people gave us on Facebook and Instagram. So that'll kind of get the conversation started, but feel free to ask a question, whether you're on Facebook or Instagram, and tonight's a good night where we'll be able to get to it as we don't have a guest on. We'll have a guest lined up for next week, but this one is just about reaching out and being able to answer your guys' questions. So, without further ado, let's drink some beer.
Yeah, let's do it. I've been looking forward to this.
We have, two cool beers, and both of them were given to us, which is best case scenario.
Yep. So we were fortunate enough to come across these beers from a couple of friends of ours. The first one coming from Steve Forziati, former CSP intern, and he's been hanging out with us, lifting with us this week, helping out at a busy week at CSP. We've got Shark Jumper IPA with Meyer, lemon added. Meyer from Night Shift Brewing. So Night Shift out of
Everett,
Massachusetts. So we've had a couple of night shifts on the podcast before, but I'm a big fan of anything that has to do with shark.
I know, you are. This is a light one in the alcohol department, 4.3%.
So we'll be drinking 3 of them. This was just released, I believe, last week, correct?
Can says 5:30, yeah. So this weekend.
Just a wee lad. I love this Bissell glass.
It holds the full beer, which is
fits the old pounder real nicely.
But it does not have a skull with a bullet going through it and hops coming out for a brain.
That's true.
So check that out. Cool. All right, let's give it a taste.
Woo-wee! I'm gonna let you react.
Wow. Whoa.
Super lemony, right?
Yeah, it's the first. It's got like a sour IPA taste.
So, it's kind of par for the course for it. It's good beer etiquette to list if anything is added to the beer outside of the regular brewing process. So, obviously, there are kind of your regular things that are added to beer, hops, malt, water, etc., etc. If you add anything to it, you're supposed to say so on the can, because lemon isn't a normal thing that you add. And a lot of times places will add fruit, or like for stouts, they'll add coffee or chocolate or something like that. So they're very upfront about their use of Meyer lemon, and you can taste it.
Yeah, well, I think it's because, to be an IPA, it means you have to use certain ingredients, right? That's what makes it an IPA.
Yep.
So, yeah, there's speculation that other IPAs that don't say it add stuff without saying anything, and people are like, how do they get that taste? They're adding something to it and not listing it. But
that is the accusation, anyways, of some of our favorite brews that just get such great fruit and juice flavors.
Yeah, but everyone wants to knock you down when you're on top.
Yeah. Hayes going
second and third sip I actually like a little better. The first one was really pungent.
Abrasive.
Yeah, abrasive, but It's refreshing. It's different.
It really is. Yeah.
I think I could drink it in like 3 minutes if I wanted to. But
Yeah. You want to race? Well,
yeah, it'll be a short show. Cool. All right. So I'm going to throw the first question at you, and I'm just going to go kind of in order, unless I think the question is not any good. So the first question that I like on this list here that we have is from our buddy Michael out in Ohio, Mr. Anderson, and he's got a question. Wants
Why
to know,
can't I find any clean shirts? Is that his question?
No. He does lift shirtless a lot.
All the time.
Yep. Mike is a client of ours, distance-based, actually from Massachusetts, moved to Ohio, but trains without his shirt on a lot. So if you're listening and you're shirtless, let us know. He wants to know, how do you fix someone who can't stop hitching on their deadlifts?
That's a great question, because I've struggled with that in the past and recently too. The main reason I find that people hitch during the deadlift is because they're out of position right away off the floor. Usually, the more rounded you are off the floor, the more likely you are to stall over as the bar passes over your knee, and the more likely you are to hitch. So improving your position off the floor and being less rounded through your upper back, however you might go about doing that, whether you're starting too close to the bar, so backing off a little bit and getting more of a forward chin angle, just taking more slack out of the bar so you can be stiffer through your upper back and be less rounded. A lot of times if you just improve your starting position off the floor, you end up less rounded, the transition of the bar over your knee is better, and you don't end up having to hitch.
Yep. I think another thing, if we think about it, similar to stem off of that problem, is like if you're rounding people that round their upper back a lot on the deadlift, we've discussed the reasons that can happen too, from like a weakness standpoint. So it could be, everything could be evaluated down to, is it a technical weakness, or is it like a muscular weakness that's causing something to not act properly. In either case, like if your upper back rounds a lot, usually you'll find that your hips have pretty much already reached their highest point, and the hips are pretty much already where they need to be. So your legs are essentially done working for you at that point. Your hips are done working for you, and you still have 6 or 7 inches of the deadlift to go, and you're just not strong enough to move from all that flexion back into a position where you can just use your back to get it up. So you hitch, because hitching kind of returns you back to the position that you should have been in at that point, where you did have some knee bend left and have some leg drive to go. So yeah, I think that's the biggest culprit of it. I think is like a lack of using your legs early on and like steadily through the pull. So then you end up having to reuse them, so to speak. Another reason it can happen is, and it's in the same vein, but you might just need stronger musculature at the hip muscles. If they're weaker, they're going to try to bring themselves closer to the bar as soon as possible, and then leave you in that kind of crappy position. As far as how do you fix it, I mean, what would you do to fix it?
I like pause deadlifts a lot, and I think we use a lot of different variations of the pause deadlift. You can pause very shortly off the floor, just as you break the floor, maybe 2 inches off the floor, and then unpause and finish the lockout. Or you can pause like right below the knee, which is where most of the issues tend to happen as the bar transitions over the knee. So I like high pauses to kind of fix with hitching, and really having lifters focus on, of course, they're going to extend their hips, but also locking out their knees really aggressively, so that there's no opportunity for the knees to rebend. And like we talk about hitching, like everyone knows what it is, and I'm assuming most listeners do. But hitching the deadlift means like as you lift the bar up, your knees rebend after they've already straightened out. So it's kind of like shoving your knees in front of the bar and like ramping it up to lockout. And you kind of know it when you see it, and I think all of us have done it at one point or another. But pausing right below the knee and then focusing on locking the knees out very aggressively after you unpause, I like that a lot. And then just good old-fashioned Romanian deadlifts, RDLs, another great one to work on really powerful hip extension.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're not familiar with hitching, like an easy way to see it, it doesn't always...
Watch one of my deadlift Instagram videos.
Some hitches are more obvious than others. Some are like almost like ratcheting hitches where it's happening multiple times. But technically, I guess, I don't know I don't know if this is even true by definition, but what you'll get red lighted for in a powerlifting meet that will be called a hitch is really any time your knees get in front of the bar once the bar is past the knees. So if you're just watching your deadlift or someone deadlift from the side, once the bar gets past the knees, you can't see the knees go in front of the bar. So those are all things that I would definitely say to fix the hitch. The hitch can also just be a really bad habit, I think, where you just have to like practice not hitching. Where you, for some reason, maybe you've just gotten away with it for a long time where no one called you on it. Or you have maybe an Olympic lifting background where the pull was different off of the floor. Or you came from like a strongman background. In either case, you just need to make sure that hitches don't really surface until weights are pretty heavy usually too. So making sure that if you always hitch at a certain weight, then that you can't consider that like a personal record for you. You shouldn't be working off of that number if it's something that you're always hitching at. So you have to correct that, and you're going to strengthen up the hips, and you're going to strengthen up your technique by, again, working sub-maximally and just doing more volume the correct way. Quick fix-wise, like you mentioned, when things get heavy, so if you're like coaching someone in a meet or, they're going for heavier pulls and you're seeing the knees kind of stay soft to rebend is, like, find hamstring tension, keep thinking about locking out your knees, and then another one I find I use a lot is just be patient. Sometimes...
That's huge. That's really underrated.
Sometimes you just panic once you get around the knee and you just start doing everything that comes to mind to try to get the bar up, and you end up hitching, when in reality, if you just held your ground, even though it was going to be a really slow deadlift, you probably could have pulled it without hitching at all.
Yeah, I think a really big thing is that people are so adamant about like getting their hips through, and they're trying to push their hips through into the bar. But the only problem with that is if you pull a really heavy deadlift, sometimes your knees will still be bent as the bar passes your knees, especially if you're too rounded over. If your knees are still bent and you try to push your hips through, your knees are going to come with you. Yeah. Knees will shoot in front of the bar, so they'll rebend, they'll bend more than what they already are. And then as you stand up, you kind of like ramp the bar up your legs. That, of course, is a hitch. So that patience thing is really, really important. And you think of trying to lift a heavy weight as fast as possible to make sure that you don't miss it. But sometimes once that bar gets above your knee, you just got to be patient. Mm-hmm. You just got to kind of let the bar come up so your knees lock out and your hips lock out at kind of an even pace to make sure your knees don't push forward. It's kind of a hard concept to grasp.
Yeah.
And so many times you hear people at meets when somebody like starts to pull a grinder deadlift, they yell hips through, hips through, hips through, and sometimes that's maybe the wrong coaching cue. You want that person to wait and not push their hips through too early until their legs are completely locked out.
Yeah. I totally agree too. Like as far as accessory exercises that can help with that problem, RDLs are a go-to. Kettlebell swings can be a good one too. Just because if you do kettlebell swings correctly, it's going to be, you're basically working over and over again on the timing of the knees and the hips locking out together. Before I got into powerlifting, I did a lot of kettlebell swings, and I think that helped me become a better deadlifter, just because the intent is very fast and explosive, and there's a very hard and explosive locking of the knees that goes on in a kettlebell swing. So try those out and see how that goes. All right. Next question on the list. Making training modifications to get strong as fuck while dealing with injuries.
Is that what AF stands for?
I believe that's what AF stands for.
It's Abercrombie and Fitch.
It could be.
There's no such thing as strong Abercrombie and Fitch.
No. Even though there's a moose as their logo, which is a big.
But have you seen the models?
Yes.
Yeah, they don't eat.
No.
They definitely don't lift.
No. And they're like 13. I always hated Abercrombie & Fitch as a kid, though.
It's too loud in there. It smells too bad.
It smelled awful.
Yeah.
And personally, I just, I could never really fit into Abercrombie & Fitch clothes.
Let me guess. Were you a PacSun guy?
PacSun was better.
Yeah.
Big Bob store guy.
Bob's furniture store.
Old Navy. Yeah, I wore furniture.
I shopped a lot at.
A lot of bed sheets there that fit great.
I was big on Hot Topic.
Yeah, I actually wore a lot of band T-shirts. Hot
Yeah.
Topic was a big spot for me.
Yep. My wife can attest to that. I have several like T-shirt blankets of T-shirts she pretty much got sick of me wearing, so she just sewed them together into like
That's cool.
into blankets. So
I have so many T-shirts I wish I still had. It's my own fault because I just get tons of T-shirts and then I just donate them after a certain amount of time.
that's definitely a strength coach problem, right? Like you get free T-shirts from everyone.
Yeah, it's like, is it soccer where they give each other their jerseys after the game?
Something like that, yeah.
It's like every time you visit a gym, I mean, you bring a T-shirt, they give you a T-shirt. Maybe we can change. There's some questions on here about things you would want to change in the industry, which will be good topics for later
Stop
on.
giving me so many T-shirts.
But yeah, maybe we could like switch it to like coins or logo golf balls or something.
Yeah.
Something we can collect instead of
Pint
T-shirts.
glasses.
Pint glasses. Yeah. Let's change the. We'll start doing that. We'll be the innovators there. All right. So making training modifications to get strong AF while dealing with injuries. We touched upon this a little bit already in an episode. I guess we didn't talk about specific injuries. I would say.
Yep. Well, this was asked by Ashley, who is another one of our colleagues / co-workers every once in a while when she comes to CSP. And I know Ashley's injury has always been her lower back. So we deal with a lot of people with lower back injuries in one way, shape, or form. And usually the first thing that you do is you take away spinal loading. So unfortunately that takes away a lot of our big rock lifts. It's tough to deadlift, it's tough to squat. For some people, it's even tough to bench to get into an aggressive arch position. So you got to find ways to take the load off the spine, and usually that means taking the load off of the back or off of the front, and usually putting like something in your hands, or whether it's pushing a sled instead of squatting, or like doing kettlebell swings instead of a deadlift, where you can be a little bit more like less of a direct spinal load, less possibility for spinal flexion under load. The lower back is tough, but usually that's the first thing to go, is the direct placement of the bar on the back or in the hands, where you could get some sort of shear load or compressive load.
Yeah, I agree. And definitely well, I mean, I guess there's, flexion intolerant and extension intolerant, but in either case, like, taking the bar off your back is a big one a lot of times. I think you can go back. I think, I'm not going to get too deep into this, but, like, a lot of it's technique stuff, too. Even, like, I recently suffered my probably first ever, like, legitimate back injury. I'm too stubborn to ever find out, like, what something actually is. But I do always figure out a way to train around it. And the squat was one where that got kind of bad. And then the injury can sometimes mess up your technique, where then you're doing more damage. So I didn't even hurt it squatting. I heard it doing a trap bar deadlift. Stupid exercise. And then...
if I could stop you for a second, like, whenever we have athletes at the gym ask us why trap bar deadlift isn't up on the leaderboard, I tell them explicitly, because it's a fake exercise. It's not even real, and that's the one that
it's more back friendly.
Yeah.
Except I know myself and other people who have actually only hurt their back doing trap bar deadlifts. Good topic, actually. I'm gonna write that down. We can talk about why I don't like the trap bar deadlift as much as I used to later. But now I'm off topic. Oh, you noticed while we were training that I was butt winking. I had a lot of hip, movement. My back was moving from like a neutral position to a flex position, which something never really happened to me while I was squatting. I think just the pain, radiating pain from my lower back caused a lot of like protective tension in my hips, and things got bad. So just having to reform your technique. First, take the bar off your back, then really evaluate, is your technique up to snuff if something's still hurting your back. And then if you've taken the time off, plus gotten your technique in line and you're still having pain, well, then it could be like a much deeper issue, and then you figure out if, heavy lifting is even something that's going to ever agree with your back, or those exercises. But
yeah, that was a big learning curve for me in the past few years, is like looking at somebody's technique who is in pain. It's like, okay, you're in pain, let's make sure you're doing the exercise correctly first. And you do it and you hammer home technique and things look good and things kind of check out. Certain things are moving where they're supposed to move, and certain things are stabilizing where they're supposed to stabilize, and it still hurts. And that just blew my mind. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And then you do come to realize that some people, over the course of their training career, do develop intolerances to certain positions and certain loading patterns. So, it might be somebody who's like, their back is like compressive and flexion intolerant, so they're just not going to be able to load maybe even a goblet squat, because there is that extra compression. They're not going to be able to do maybe even like an RDL because there is the potential for some small little bit of flexion that might hurt. The good news is that as far as the lower half goes, you can still load up a lot of single leg exercises pretty heavily. You can lunge, you can do split squats, Bulgarians. Sometimes things like glute ham raises are fine, where you can still build a good amount of hamstring strength. And I meant to ask Josh Bryan about this when he was on, but I do remember there's like this urban legend that for one of the Mr. Olympia competitions, that Branch Warren did nothing for his lower body except drag a sled, and came in with like absolutely massive legs because he was so jacked up he couldn't squat, couldn't deadlift. So all he did was drag and push a sled, and still built massive size. Granted, he had some extra aid, from pharmaceuticals, but the point stands that you can build up a lot of volume and potentially put on some strength and size without any appreciable spinal loading or eccentric loading.
yeah. Well, I think reverse sled drags build up. Josh has talked about that a lot. Reverse sled drags for quad development is huge. I mean, it is just a bunch of leg extensions. I mean, you miss out on the eccentric portion of it by doing sled drags, but you can still make it up by being able to do a lot more repetitions,
right,
and a lot more volume of it too. So that's the back. We'll go with that. I think if you check out the episode that we did, pretty much all about common pain associated with exercises and how to work around it, you'll get a lot more answers there. Sean St. Ange says the pairing of beers while listening to specific Metallica albums, and that Master of Puppets would be paired with Heady Topper, and Load would be paired with Natty Ice. Any quick comments on that?
First of all, Load and Reload, both great records. I really like them a lot. And anyone who says that like those records suck, that like I only like the first 4 albums, get over yourself. Metallica's never written what I would call a bad album, just they have 4 that are untouchable. Okay. And when you start off your career making 4 of the best records of all time within the first 5 years, you're going to have some people who don't like the rest of the stuff. I got to say, I saw this yesterday and it absolutely blew my mind. Saint Anger was released 14 years ago yesterday. Do you not feel fucking old because of that?
I do feel old, and I was also going to say Saint Anger is not one of my favorite albums by them.
And I don't think it's anyone's, but like definitely misunderstood. If you watch it's hard to watch the documentary that was made about the making of that, Some Kind of Monster, because half of it is like Metallica being like spoiled rock stars, and the other half is like you understanding like they were going through some shit, and like you understand why the album came out the way it did. But that was the first Metallica record that came out when I was like aware of them, like being a fan.
Yeah.
I started listening to them when I was in like 6th grade, so like 12 years old. Like the S&M album, the live album with the symphony orchestra had just come out. So I was waiting all the way up until 2003. I was a freshman in high school when it came out. And I sent my dad all the way to the nearest FYE which was 2 hours away in Burlington, Vermont, to grab the record. He picked me up from school. We popped it in the stereo. I'm all jacked up to hear it. And it comes on, and I'm like, what is this? This doesn't even sound like Metallica.
So it was also your first experience of that. I think that happens with a lot of bands. Honestly.
Yeah, and they, you get a band that's been around long enough, they're going to take a hard left turn, do something weird. But there's something about the anticipation of a Metallica album, because they don't come around too often. And I gotta say, like all the frustrations that came with kind of an album that didn't meet your expectations were totally blown away when Death Magnetic came out in 2008, and then Hardwired to Self-Destruct coming out this past year. What an amazing feeling to see a band like make those transformations over time. So Sean, I love you, but I challenge you to sit down and listen to Load front to back, listen to Reload front to back. I guarantee that you will equate it to better than a Natty Ice when all is said and done.
Natty Ice does pack a punch, though. All right, so Sandeep, all the way from India, our friends out there, asked the question, how do we program for a general pop who enjoys powerlifting but probably aren't going to compete in powerlifting in an enjoyable and injury-minimizing manner?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I think Jim Laird had some good points on this last episode, some stuff that definitely got my mind thinking. Mm-hmm. The biggest thing I think is that you don't have to be so strict with specificity. So somebody who's competing in powerlifting is going to have to really try hard to justify straying away from the squat, bench, and deadlift. You got to keep those in one way, shape, or form pretty much year-round. If you're fresh off a meet, maybe you can give yourself 4 weeks or so without them. But if somebody is interested in powerlifting, aka getting as strong as possible in the squat, bench, and deadlift, but they don't need to compete, then you just have so much more freedom to put in variations, to step away from one or more of those lifts at a time. I find myself a lot of times dropping one of those, usually the squat or the deadlift, out at one point or another and focusing just on one of the lower body focused lifts. So you just don't have to adhere to specificity nearly as much.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, one thing I'll say is, and I've heard a question like this before, or posed like this before, is, I have general population who enjoys powerlifting, which to me, I take that as enjoys improving their strength at the big three lifts in some way. So they're measuring their success somewhat on how much they can squat, bench press, and deadlift. But yeah, they're probably not going to compete, which is fine. As far as the injury minimizing part, I mean, even if I have a competitive powerlifter that I'm training, I'm still trying to minimize injury because you can't compete in powerlifting if you're hurt. So I know there's risk to reward things that go on with that, but I think it is important to have balance in a program, even for someone that competes even at a higher level, because if they get hurt in training and they can't compete in the meet that they want to do, then there's a whole waste of time.
Yeah, and you just brought up something that kind of always strikes a chord with me, is that people assume powerlifting is inherently dangerous or inherently going to get you injured, and that's definitely not true. It's not the most joint friendly sport, but there aren't many joint friendly sports except for checkers or something. Even then, I don't know, I'd probably find a way to hurt myself playing checkers. But I think the lifts themselves, executed properly, are completely safe. A lot of times it's just the volume and intensity, the combination of the two, that's really leading to the overuse injuries. So if you manage those and maybe don't push somebody quite as hard, especially on the volume side of things, just rep after rep after rep with the potential for technique degradation, I mean, I think that's a pretty good way to manage the injury side of things.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the other thing I take into account is if someone considers themselves a competitive powerlifter, then I'm going to assume that they also consider what they're doing outside of the gym to be in line with a competitive athlete. So they're taking recovery more seriously, nutrition more seriously, lifestyle habits more seriously to handle that volume. I mean, so then the other thing that popped in my head is, in that case of like general pop who enjoys powerlifting, competitive powerlifter, probably still going to have a lot of similarities between what we do squat, bench, deadlift. When we get to the accessory work, if it's a competitive powerlifter, I'm basing almost all of the accessory work on how are these exercises making your squat, your bench press, and your deadlift go up. And that's where the risk to reward starts to come in a little bit. Like if we're doing a bench press day, I don't really give a crap about a balance between pushing and pulling. We're going to do a lot more pushing because there's no pulling in the meat kind of thing. Whereas if it's more gen pop, then I'm thinking once we get through our barbell exercises, of course I want to put something in there to help aid those, but I get a little bit more liberty in as far as like variation and just doing like more circuits and I'm not going to say doing stuff to keep them more healthy than the competitive powerlifter because I try to keep that into account anyways for both groups. But yeah, so I would say sometimes, yeah, definitely you got to manage volume and intensity only in my eyes because the general pop person is not taking it as seriously outside of the gym. Like they could probably handle enough volume and intensity, but they're also more likely to not sleep enough and not eat enough. But when it comes to the accessory work, I'm thinking more well-rounded, general health, move in every plane of motion, don't leave anything out kind of. And from like a mental standpoint, the variation breaks up the monotony, whereas that's not always needed with competitive powerlifters because they're focused on that goal.
Yep, I have a question for you that I thought of when you just were talking about that. So you just had a couple lifters come off of really great meets. Chris from Philly and Jillian from Ohio. So when you have somebody who just competed, what's your go-to training plan coming right off a meet if they don't have another meet coming up that you have to kind of jump right into preparation for?
Well, so the week after the meet, I kind of asked, do you want a program or not? Well, so sometimes no, and they're like, I just want to, free ball it this week and do some. I give them some like guidelines, or sometimes depending on who we're working with, they might already be a little bit well versed in what they should and should not do, and so they can kind of do their own thing. Like in the case of one of the lifters who did want a program, just 3 days a week program. RPEs are staying at 7 out of 10, so kind of like a typical deload week. Where we're doing, those workouts shouldn't take more than 45 minutes. Getting in, no true squat with a barbell, no true bench press with a barbell, no true deadlift. We're still making those movements. We did like a goblet squat, we did push-ups, we did. But then transitioning off of that week of just recovery, basically, if we have the time to do it, I'm thinking more work capacity based for the first 3 to 4 weeks. So, and that's where it's going to be a lot of just general movement prep because depending on how long we were training, we probably didn't do a lot of pushing the sled. We didn't do a lot of single leg exercises. I mean, I always try to keep those things in there in some capacity, but I do want to get them in shape, if you will, to be able to handle the rigors of a bunch of volume and heavy loading coming forward, and that's really important. So that's kind of where we'll transition. The other reason to do that is the last thing you want to do sometimes when people finish like a lot of intensity and a lot of volume wrapped up in 12 to 16 weeks, and then they hit the meet, and then the week after, if they had a good meet, they still might be a little amped up from it. You don't want to get into heavier training right away or even planned out training right away, I don't think, because that all might catch up to them like that next week or the week after that when they're like, I feel like shit. Everyone feels like shit. I don't ever want that feeling to happen, so I try to, what can we do that's productive that's also like 100% success rate? And to me, that's like, let's just build some general work capacity and do some stuff like that, or, and hypertrophy work, like bodybuilding type stuff.
I like that. Sometimes I'm a little lost in terms of what to do after. I always am hesitant to back off completely, because a lot of times leading up to a meet, especially the week before, they've hardly done anything. They've tapered off and the volume has gone way down. But I think we talked about this a little bit, maybe when we were talking to Adam Pine about, like, you go 9 for 9 at a meet and leave like a little on the table, you probably feel pretty good the week after. But you go like 4 or 5 for 9 with a couple of misses and some real straining, then you might feel a little bit more banged up. So that feeling of exhaustion that you expect might be there like more immediately than if you had a really good meet.
Yeah. I think the other thing I've tried to like take more stock in with after helping, more people with meets and things like that is just the mental part of it. So I think it takes a mental toll. Like if they're taking it seriously and it's like a big competition for them, even if they go 9 for 9 and leave something on the platform, there was still a lot of like nervousness and built up, and even the people that say they're not nervous, not anxious, like there's some of that going on. And I think what I've noticed is you can really sway if we already know that. Let's say, like we already have some pretty good science to say your 1 rep max could fluctuate within the. We talked about this last week. 18% was brought up.
That's such a huge window.
It's a huge window. I don't want to mess with anyone's psyche. Like, we just got off a meet. We have another one planned. The last thing we want to do is start in a hole where we're like, why does this feel heavy? Why does everything feel heavy? So the more I'm seeing the value more just constantly set people up for success, because if they feel invincible and feel like they can't miss, they could hit some really big weights. Even with not a lot of training. Like talking to Adam a couple weeks ago, he pulled 760 in a meet in April, where he didn't actually pull 700 since that meet previously because of some injuries and stuff like that. Like strength doesn't just go away unless you do absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I think that's proof more than anything that like if you feel like you got to touch heavy weight frequently to stay strong, like that's up here.
Yeah.
That's a mental thing, because we've seen it so many times that really mentally strong and like confident lifters are able to just hit PRs when they haven't touched within 5, 7, 8% of that lift in their training, maybe even more.
So we have one question coming in, which from D Rack out in Washington, longtime friend and client of the Strength House. So I want to answer that for him. But first, we need to pour our next beer.
Yeah, I gotta say the Shark Jumper was my favorite night shift beer that I've had to date.
Wow, and you don't like night shift at all.
Night shift has yet to impress me, and I was ready to just go for the jugular and be like, this beer's overrated, blah, blah, blah. Speaking of beers that you think are overrated.
I don't know if this one's overrated yet. Breweries, you mean that are overrated? Yeah.
That's what I meant, yeah.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
All right, beer number 2, Ouroboros from the Alchemist. Stowe, Vermont, where my heart is.
Not in Stowe anymore, is it? Oh,
yeah. Used to be in Waterbury, now it's Stowe.
Okay, got it.
American, double IPA. So this one is from our longtime friend, CSP family, Michelle. So Ouroboros, from my understanding, used to be on draft at the Alchemist way back when. Way back. And they just brought it back. Is there any... No, they don't do any sort of...
There's a little like thing you can put your cell phone on. Maybe.
Q scan thing. It's extinct.
Well, we could drink it.
Let's drink it. I like this can art a lot. Ouroboros is like it's a snake that eats itself. Dates back to some... Nice. I don't know what culture it comes from, but it's in some sort of folklore from something. I don't know.
It's got that usual Alchemist look. I'm skeptical.
Yeah, kind of like a darker golden color, a little bit more see-through than your standard New England IPA.
It smells dank. Like...
Oh, man.
This smell...
Yeah.
It smells like straight marijuana.
Smells like Bob Marley's...
Yeah.
The inside of Bob Marley's car. Holy moly.
Wow. That's weird.
That's crazy.
Alright,
I'm gonna let you go first.
I had 2 sips.
The smell is so intense. It's been a long time since I've had a beer that's been this dank.
I like it. I think my thing with the Alchemist is I think I only like it if it's super fresh.
And that's the thing, is their beers don't hold up. They do
get
not
really
last.
Sweet and malty like right away.
Yep, and as per most Alchemists, they don't stamp the date on any of their cans, so you pretty much gotta go there and get it fresh, or know that your beer mule was just there. I love this.
It's really good.
Yeah,
it's really good. But the thing about the Alchemist beers is I can taste everything I don't like about Alchemist. I can't taste it. I can feel it knocking on the door. You know what I mean? And it doesn't come out.
Like if you gave this beer one more week, that you probably wouldn't care for it too much.
Yeah, no, because it tastes great, and then on the initial, and then there's usually an aftertaste with some Alchemist beers I just don't like. It's malty and sweet, and it doesn't have that aftertaste.
Yeah.
But I could see where it would if I didn't drink it soon.
Yeah, and there's a mouthfeel difference here too. There's more. It's stickier, less soft. But
Biggie says it is not that good.
What do you know?
All right.
Anyways, so give me the rest of yours that you don't want. I don't.
Cool can art. I like it. It's different, and it literally tastes like drinking Bud, kind of. Not Budweiser.
Hoppy bong water.
That's pretty good. All right. So Rack asks, aside from nutrition and sleep, what else has helped your recovery the most?
So there's a lot of recovery modalities out there, and a lot of different machines and products and stuff that aim to improve your recovery. So I would say the one thing that helped me the most when I was focusing more on it, I've definitely been a little bit of a slacker on it recently, is keeping up with my aerobic work on non-lifting days. I definitely felt like I could handle the most volume and felt like I recovered the fastest when I was doing 2 dedicated days of low intensity aerobic work per week. Definitely fell off hard recently, and I'm actually aiming to go in tomorrow and do my first dedicated aerobic training session in maybe 2 months. But when I would do something reverse sled drags for 15-20 minutes straight, a nice low intensity bike ride, something like some med ball circuits at 70% effort, that seemed to help me the most with bouncing back, reducing soreness, ability to tolerate volume. So just making sure you get off your ass on non-lifting days and do something easy for a decent duration, 15, 20, 25, 30 minutes.
Yeah, I think that one's huge. The one thing aerobic work helps with, which I want to touch upon, was I think one thing for me is budgeting time to relax, unplug, unwind. It can be really big for recovery in a lot of measures. So a lot of people talk about meditation. I'd be lying if I said I sit down and meditate. I haven't quite gotten to that level yet. But I'm talking more just plan some leisurely activities, or one thing I try to do is if I'm trying to sit down and get work done and I don't really feel like getting work done at that time, that's a sign where it's all right, don't force yourself to do it. Sorry. Boom.
Virgin lungs.
But instead, go watch a movie or something and come back to it. When you don't feel like you want to train, you know that you're probably not recovering and you're overtrained. When you feel like you don't want to get, your continuing education in or your work done or something like that, you're probably overstimulated, overstressed. So a big thing for recovery is and this coming from someone who likes it's a struggle to sit down for like a long period of time, like watch something. Like I like to just do something all the time, not necessarily productive, but like do something all the time. So for me, just trying to unwind, find leisurely time. Whether it be watch a movie or go golfing or go for a walk, something like that goes a long way for recovery.
And we've had the benefit of receiving a lot of like samples of products and stuff like that aimed at recovery. I know that a product that I've used with a decent amount of success is the Mark Pro, an e-stim unit that theoretically increases recovery by moving lymph fluid through like passive muscle contraction, and I like that quite a bit. I used it a lot when I first got it. Kind of got away from it a little bit, but started using it more recently after kind of like my neck and shoulder injury that's been going on, and could be placebo effect. Theoretically, it makes all the sense in the world. Is like moving lymph fluid, getting inflammation to go down. I like that a lot. I use that a lot on my traps, my pecs. I used it on my hamstring the other day. Again, a little softball injury. Came out of the box a little bit too hard. And, just spending it. And going back on what you just said, maybe the reason why the Mark Pro works so well for me.
To sit down.
I got to park my ass in the chair
yeah.
for 20 or 30 minutes and just do nothing.
Yeah.
I like the Mark Pro quite a bit. We've got the Normatec at CSP. I've used it a couple times, not enough times to be able to tell if it helps all that much. I know Rack is a fan of the Normatec. I've seen it on your Insta story. You're sitting and getting your feet inflated. So there are a lot of products out there, but the Mark Pro is one that I've used with regularity and like a lot.
Yeah. I've tried to use a similar unit recently. I feel like I responded better to some areas than others. I feel like sometimes, like knock on wood, nothing hurts me right now. So I'm just like putting it on, just being like, oh well, this area takes a lot of stress in training. I'll just put it on there to help recovery. And sometimes I feel like I wake up and it's stiffer.
Yeah.
Maybe doing nothing would I didn't need to like stimulate the muscle. But I've never really got a chance to use it when something's like a little bit traumatized or needs a little extra flush. The float tank really is something I'd love to try out because it combines, what I've seen just from simple measures of trying to relax, something like that where it's not only aiding you but forcing you to relax at the same time, I think could be pretty powerful. So
yeah, the float tank is really, really intriguing.
Yeah. So we'll have to try that out for ourselves and see what we think.
Which of you is the better softball player? Michelle asks.
Well, softball's a team game. You got 9 players, 10 players on the field in co-ed softball. I'm going to give the political answer and say, we couldn't do it without every member of that team. Except there's a couple we could probably do without. But,
that is a great team player answer.
Yeah. I mean, we play co-ed softball in a league where we're like an elite strength and conditioning facility fielding a softball team in a co-ed softball league. So the fact that we lose any games is really atrocious.
But I'm going to give you this. I could not field a single ground ball in the infield if it were hit to me. I would jump out of the way so fucking fast. It's not even funny. So the fact that you play on the infield and that you don't catch balls in the teeth or get hit in the nuts every single time, that kudos to you, man. I could never do that.
And there's also a reason I don't play in the outfield. Because even though I go out there and I remind myself every time, first step back, never first step forward. I always take first step forward, turn around, and then chase a ball. Sometimes I just run like 10 yards past where it lands. So we were both catchers, but I never learned the skill of catching a fly ball. I can play third base in softball because when all else fails, I just rely on letting the ball hit me and then picking it up and throwing it as hard as I can to first base. So,
it's a grand old time.
All right, so there's one question before we leave I wanted to get to because it's a good question, I think, an interesting question. So I'm going to pose this to you, coming from your client, I believe.
Yep, my man Joey.
Joey says, cleaning up / improving the state of the fitness community, or how to just create more positive, fun environment in regular commercial gyms for those that don't have access to specialized gyms. There was one thing that I wanted to say about this question really quick, and that is, I think specialized gyms are more common than people think. And I would encourage people who train in commercial gyms. You're always going to pay less to train in a commercial gym. But if you want to support a small business and support a better product and things like that, then pony up the extra $50 per month and train in a specialized gym. Because I've heard this a lot, and maybe it is true. Like, I don't know, I haven't lived technically in the middle of nowhere, and I don't know where Joey lives or if that even applies to him. But there's specialized gyms that you can get to usually if you want to get to it.
Yeah, and I think all you really got to do is type in like the town name or the city name into Google plus powerlifting or plus strength and conditioning or plus sports performance. You're usually going to find something within driving distance. But that's a really good question. I don't know if I have necessarily an answer to it. I mean, Joey's question is exactly what we're trying to do with the Strength House, right? That's exactly what we're trying to do with this online community is bring together people that may not necessarily have what Joey's asking about in person.
Yeah.
They may not have the training environment. They may not have the support system in terms of in-person coaches or training partners or something like that. And we've got a lot of lifters who train successfully in a commercial gym environment.
Alone, yeah.
Yeah, and training alone sucks, and it's not necessarily the best way to go about maybe being the greatest strength athlete of all time. But a lot of people train alone, and I've spent a good portion of my training career training alone, and like I just think that what we're trying to do online is the best thing that we can do for the people in Joey's situation who train in a commercial gym without training partners, without spotters, and without necessarily an environment that is conducive for being an elite level power lifter.
Yeah, no, that's very true, and I think finding a community like we've built online really does help. Where you can watch other people's videos, and I was surprised even in talking to some of our clients online, being like, how many of other clients do you talk to? Like, I didn't realize, and maybe this is like bad of me, but also was just like an awesome moment to realize how many of the people that are in our online community online, like, talk to each other outside of the group.
Right, it's awesome, right? It definitely makes me proud of what we've done.
Right, and so like when it's not an in-person gym, like you can't see it happening, so I'm never the wiser, you know what I mean? Like, I see them liking and commenting on stuff in the group, but I don't know that, like, they've formed a good friendship outside of it, too. So having somewhere to put your lifts up, to stay accountable, finding an online group like that is huge. Other than that, as far as, like, so from the create a more positive, fun environment in a regular commercial gym, I mean, I worked in a pretty big commercial gym chain for about 3.5 years. I mean, you can try to find like-minded people in the gym. There'll be some of them. There was always some of them. Starting a training group, trying to show up at the same time. Sometimes that means putting yourself out there a little bit. I mean, I think the people that like to train hard at the same time are the people that like to put their hood on and their headphones and not talk to anyone. But if you see someone else, training hard or doing things the right way by, your scope, then, make a small conversation. There's one thing to be like, oh, I just go to the gym to socialize, but, I mean, in some ways, that's part of the fun about going to the gym is socializing. Like,
yeah,
you got to just be able to flip the switch when it's time for your set. But like, I love staff lift because I like acting like a clown and socializing. It wouldn't be as fun if that didn't happen.
And it seems like it's also a lot like the person who's afraid to like raise their hand and ask a question in class because they're afraid of sounding dumb. when in reality, the question they want to ask is the same question that 4 or 5 other people in class want to ask. Chances are, if you feel like if you're in a commercial gym and you feel like you're the only one there who's interested in, training at a high level, chances are there are probably other people in that gym, maybe not there when you're there, who are interested in the same thing. So maybe if you bring it up to a staff member, you bring it up to the owner, like, look, you've got some lifters here who are really interested in doing X, Y, Z, whether it's like getting better equipment so they can train harder, or getting a group together that trains at a certain time. Like, maybe there are like-minded individuals that you just don't realize, and all you got to do is make somebody aware of it and speak your mind. And I would think that owners of commercial gyms would be willing to hear the opinions of members who could potentially make the gym better.
Absolutely.
That's what they want to do. It's also worth noting that Joey he's a national level powerlifter. He's going to compete at USAPL Nationals this year, and he's done it all at a commercial gym. He does all his training there. So for anybody who uses training at a commercial gym as an excuse, there's no excuse. You can be a national level powerlifter training on lousy equipment in a lousy environment. All you got to do is put your mind to it.
Absolutely. And really all that comes down to training hard is like your effort. So there's a good chance too there's people around you that just don't know their ass from their elbow, and like they might watch everything you're doing as someone that's a little bit more informed, and they're just nervous to talk to you. And if you start the conversation with them, maybe you take someone under your wing and you help them out a little bit. But as much as as someone that if I went to a commercial gym, I just hate having headphones in, so I can't do it. But
none of them fit my ears.
They're all uncomfortable. But back in the day, yeah, I would have been more like I'm above the commercial gym. Like I got to put my headphones in and act like an absolute savage and not talk to anybody. If you're feeling a little lonely in your commercial gym, it might be time to just start a couple conversations with people that might be like-minded. Heck, some of the staff might be like-minded. So that could be one way to make it a more positive, more fun environment. And just go for it. Be yourself. Like, if you're holding back because you feel like you're in a commercial gym, I mean, just be a little weird and see if other people take to it or not. That would be my other thought. And then the top part of this question, before we head out for the night, cleaning up / improving the state of the fitness community, which is, a long-winded question, obviously. So, Tony, if you could change one, this is kind of a token question, but a token question I kind of tend to like. If you could change one thing about the fitness community, what would it be? Identify the problem, give me the solution.
Too many voices, not enough wisdom. Too many people contributing their opinions and their advice when their opinions and their advice don't carry a lot of weight because they're not backed by experience. As somebody who started a blog and tried to establish themselves as a fitness expert before they'd ever trained anybody in person, I was guilty of this, and I can say that I did it totally backwards, and it's really tough because social media and the internet give people a voice when maybe they're not ready to have a voice. So I would say is mandate that people get a job training people in person for a minimum of 2 years before they start a website and start social media accounts that allow them to disseminate fitness information.
That's fair. I agree with you.
I broke all those rules, man, so I can say it.
Yeah. Fitness industry it's a jungle, really, because it's super low barrier to entry. So from a technical standpoint, what probably needs to happen for the fitness industry to get better, or at least more, I don't know what the word, I always lose a word every week. It probably has to get regulated a little bit at some point. As someone with no piece of paper for a formal education, I can say that the low barrier to entry can be very good. Because you can get some people in there that are dedicated, that, the road was just a little rockier for them. But at the same point, you could also allow those people to get certain credentials based on years of experience or something like that. Whether it be a degree in this, plus you have to take this test, plus 5 years of experience. But yeah, I don't know if there needs to be more credentials, more regular, more. There's a certain word I'm looking for. I can't think of it.
There are certain governing bodies in the fitness industry, and some contribute to the low barrier for entry. So the weekend certifications and courses.
Yeah.
While others make it exceptionally hard to get in and get a job, in terms of like the collegiate strength and conditioning field, which is what I always thought I wanted to get into, and was thankfully told by some very honest and forthcoming coaches where it's like, look, you're this old and this far into it, you've skipped steps X, Y, and Z, you're never going to be a collegiate strength coach, like do this instead. And thank God for that honest feedback. So there probably needs to be some middle ground.
Yeah. Well, what it really probably has to happen to clean up the fitness community is that it's just like cleaning up grocery stores or anything else. Like, if you don't want shit products on your shelves, then you as the consumer need to be a little bit more diligent about checking your sources.
Yep.
So it doesn't really fall on the coaches. It doesn't fall on the hoes that are on Instagram that get all their followers by like doing squats in a thong. It really comes down to you, to the consumer, the people that eat up the information. Like, if you're not actually gathering anything of worth any value from watching so and so's videos on Instagram, you're just liking them because it's good eye candy or something like that. All right. Well, every time you like that, you set the fitness industry back another day. Every time you dismiss and don't like a post that is informed and good, of full information that weighs both anecdotal evidence and research, you set the industry back another day. So the coaches who know that they're doing the right thing, like ourselves and other people out there, just have to keep doing what they're doing and towing the line between making it digestible plus informed, so that we're getting some of these followers and people from those parts of it.
Yeah, I think that's huge. A lot of people go to one end or the other. Like, all they are is entertainment value.
Right.
Like, look at me, I'm half naked, I'm exercising, I'm attractive,
Yeah.
Listen to me. Or, like, I'm so informed and nerdy and boring. I live in my parents' basement. I don't actually exercise, but I've read a bunch of journal articles, so listen to me.
Right.
Like, again, middle ground. Like, finding some way to be entertaining and informative. Right. Which, of course, is very challenging.
It is.
Beer always helps, though.
Beer always helps. So, it's a jungle. The fitness industry will always be hard to clean up. So, really, it just, all you can do as a fitness professional is, have some values, have some morals, and decide, what it is that you're going to put out there on what grounds. As a fitness consumer, you shape the industry, basically, for better or for worse. So play into what you want to play into, listen to who you want to listen to, but the industry won't get any better, just like the food industry won't get any better until you stop buying the shit. When you stop buying the shit and it doesn't sell, it doesn't get put out there anymore.
Yep. And it's a big time, like, you get what you pay for industry as well, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so answered a bunch of questions. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. We will be back next week. If you like what we're doing, please check us out on iTunes. Give us a like. Give us a review. That always helps us. Like I said, just get out there and get out to all these people that could use a little bit more informed opinions about these topics. We do have a big seminar coming up in August 20th at Cressy Sports Performance. We're doing our Optimizing the Big Three. We got about 10 seats left for that seminar. So check it out. You can check the link in the Instagram bio for the Strength House, or go to thestrengthhouse.com.
I gotta say, this is your one opportunity to come lift with us and then go taste all these beers that we taste on the podcast. You come into New England to lift with us and taste all these Massachusetts beers and New England beers. Like, this is your one shot, guys. Don't miss out.
We're gonna plan something big along the brewery lines for this one.
Yep.
We got to figure out what we're gonna do. Even if we got to go buy a bunch of beer and bring it to the seminar for like a barbecue or something after, but
Gotta share the wealth.
it will happen. We hope to see you guys there. Thank you for watching. Cheers. And
Cheers,
good
guys.
night.
See you next week.